Today, the world's 8 billionth person will be born or perhaps has been born, according to the United Nations. Now, if that's jarred you a bit, let me make it simple. By the end of today, there will be 8 billion of the human race here on Earth. Astounding, right? True. But hear this. Experts say that the global population growth is at its lowest. The UN says this is because fertility rates have fallen just as child and mother mortality rates. In clearer terms, we are not having as many children, nor are we dying as often as before. Nonetheless, some countries are contributing more to the increase than others. For example, in 61 countries, populations are expected to decrease due to falling fertility rates and emigration. However, countries of sub-Saharan Africa are responsible for more than half of the anticipated increase now and in the future, precisely 30 years from now. In fact, the growth will be concentrated in these African countries: the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Tanzania. Outside of the continent, there are India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. These 8 countries are projected to continue to lead population growth through 2050. Now, next year, India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous country. And by 2050, Nigeria could be the world's 3rd most populous country. The number of the world's people is increasing, and we are partly responsible for it. So today on the program, we ask, is this a blessing or a curse? Should we fill the earth or find ways to decrease birthing? And more critically, how far can our resources carry us? You're warmly welcome to the square once again. I am Keminni Amanor. Let's meet our guests for today's discussion. We'll start off with Nicholus, Obby Mainza, who is the Mumbwa District Agriculture Coordinator in Zambia. We'll be joined by a couple of others a little later on the program. I'll introduce them when we have them on our Zoom. But right now, let's talk to Nicholus. Nicholus, you're welcome to the program. Well, Nicholus, can you hear me?
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, Kenny.
Wonderful. Nicholus, let's start with picking your thoughts on, when the UN tells us that, well, we are growing in population, but at a slow rate. What does this mean in the first place?
Yeah. I missed your point. What's your question again?
I'm asking, what does it mean when the UN says that we are growing but at a very slow rate?
The growth rate of Africa.
Nicholus, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Right. So I'm asking to pick your thoughts on the population projection made by the UN.
Okay. Yeah, so, looking at the topic under discussion, we are trying to look at the population growth of Africa. A lot, of course, has been, a lot is involved. A lot has been happening from way back up to date as we are speaking. And just an overview, as Africa, we stand at about 1.4 trillion in terms of the population. That is according to the United Nations estimates. And then to get down to my country, of course, here back in Zambia, we are just slightly above 20 million population. The population indeed of Africa in general has been growing at a faster rate. Of course, putting into place with other external, forces. There's been other drivers that could have laid into the population to grow at such a rate. of which probably as we get down, we are going to look into those drivers and their impact on the population.
Right. So let's talk about those drivers. What is driving Africa's population growth, despite what appears to be a decline in world population growth?
We look at the drivers of this population growth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's been a lot that we probably would need to look into, like the drivers of this population where Africa is concerned. Africa in general, it's a continent that is way underdeveloped. It is way underdeveloped. We are a rich continent when it comes to the natural resource. We have a lot of natural resources, that span from, the minerals of any kind that you want to talk about. We have, for example, Southern Africa is well rich from these, copper, gold, and mention them. And these are some of the, the drivers towards the population growth that feeds into the economic growth of the continent. We are exposed to the favorable climatic conditions.
Why do you think Africans are having more children? Why do you think Africans are those that are out of the 8 countries that contribute the most to the population growth? 5 of them are from the continent.
Well, it's like I said, Africa is a developing continent. It's underdeveloped. So most of the countries, maybe let's say of that number, a good number of them are coming from Africa. So there's a lot to do when it comes to issues to do with how we organize ourselves. There's a lot that we are going to propound from there because we look at how governance is being done in Africa. So governance is actually what leads us into economic growth. That ultimately, at the end of the day, is going to have an impact on the population growth.
Very well. Just hold on for me. I will now invite into a discussion Lubinda Haabazoka. He's director of the Graduate School of Business at the University of Zambia in Lusaka. Lubinda, thank you so much for joining our discussion today. But let me first pick your thoughts. 8 billion of us now on the continent, or to be in a matter of hours. What are your thoughts about how far we have come as a human race?
Well, I think that, it's quite encouraging that the Earth population is growing. But as an economist, this population growth signals a lot of, problems to come. When you look at Africa in particular, Africa, Asia are the main drivers of population growth in the world. And unfortunately, Africa, in terms of infrastructure, has been lagging behind. So when you look at the rate at which our populations are growing, if you get Zambia, Zambia was around 6 million in 1990, and by 2010, Zambia was 12 million. And as I'm speaking to you, Zambia is about 20 million now, people. I know that's small numbers compared to, for example, Nigeria, but we are literally adding about 8 million people every 10 years. Now, when you look at life-supporting infrastructure, schools, hospitals, roads, jobs, if you don't look at infrastructure, if you look at jobs, those are lagging behind. So if your population is growing at a rate of about, maybe 50% or 80% every 10 years, and your GDP isn't growing as big as that, we are going to face a lot of problems in the future. And what can you see now when you look at this population growth? We are seeing high unemployment levels across Africa, and the most people that are suffering this are the youth, because those are the new entrants on the job market. If you look at youth unemployment in South Africa, it's over 40%. In Zambia, it's over 30%. In Kenya, it's over 50%. In Nigeria, it's even worse. So these youth will need, are going to need jobs so that they're able to sustain their livelihoods. So factories being created, new jobs being created.
I just want us to also take notice of the fact that, well, it isn't all over Africa that, people are having a lot of children. There are places in Africa that, the birth rate has reduced. For instance, in Nigeria, has gone down to 1.8 from what it used to be at 6. And so for those areas where it would seem that the birth rate is coming down, what do you think could be the contributory factors, Lubinda?
Well, I think that in areas where the population is not growing, I might attribute that maybe to high literacy levels. I would like to point out, for example, the trends in countries like South Africa, where you find, sorry to use black versus white, but when you look at the white population, they are marrying and they are having 1-2 kids. The black population is also becoming educated. Now, for them, they're not marrying because they are considering marriage to be almost expensive. South Africa's population has been a bit stagnant also of the past, same as Namibia and in some cases Botswana. So I think the education and the ability to feed a family is what is contributing to reduction in population in some cases. Zambia is quite Africa is quite an interesting case because Africa not only do economic factors affect population growth, but also religious and African beliefs, the values. So you find that women and men are taught to, when they finish school, they need to marry, and in some places you can marry more than 2 women. So you're going to have more children.
There's going to be a bit more I want us to discuss regarding, the cultural mindset of certain places here on the continent, and then also the bit about unemployment. But let's pay attention to Nicholus now. Nicholus, you're the man in the agric sector. Do we have the agricultural resources, the food, the vegetation, to be able to carry us along if we continue to grow at this projection?
Agriculture-wise, it's very interesting indeed. For Africa, generally, if you look at how Africa is performing where agriculture is concerned.
Well, I think we have lost Nicholus over the telephone. And Lubinda, if you could just take off from that question where I was asking, does the continent have the resources to carry itself along until 2100 when we are expected to really balloon? Or should we be looking at plans of minimizing birthing on the continent?
Well, I think that there's a campaign. I would like to notice that there's a campaign, especially from Western NGOs, trying to tell us that we are too many and we can't have more children and we need to do family planning and all those things. On one hand, family planning and, controlling the number of children we have in families is very good. But one thing we should not be lied to is that we do not have the resources and assets to support our big populations. When you look at African countries, I can mention there will be the largest exporter. When I just mention a country to be largest exporter of something, Zambia, largest exporter of emeralds, also one of the largest exporters of copper. When you go to Congo, Kotam and all those cobalt, it's Congo. When you go to Nigeria, you're going to find mineral resources where Nigeria is the largest in the world. So when you look at Africa in particular, Africa has the resources to sustain its resources. But unfortunately, Africa does not trade with itself. Africa wants to trade with Europe. Africa wants to trade with America. If we want to go and study, in the USA, we are going to be given a Western mentality, and we are going to be thinking in ways detrimental to the continent. Africa needs to, sit down with itself, have the conversation to say where are we, in what way are we going to go in the right direction.
Very well. And we will propose some of those solutions, in the latter part of today's discussion. But two things I want us to look at before we get there. There are many more implications that this could have on the continent in healthcare, in when it comes to food security. But I want us to pay attention to a few of them. One of them being the SDGs. When we look at the population growth and our ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, what would you say? Are we on the right path?
When you look at SDGs, I don't think we are on the right path because, we have not planned to achieve them. And, if you look at the United States of America, you're looking at over 50 states coming together to develop, a particular landmass. When you look at China, you are looking at, a country of over 1 billion working together with one common goal moving forward. Europe, they have the European Union to be able to complement each other. But when you look at Africa, Africa does not plan together. And I'll come to a situation whereby, for example, a can of a soft drink in South Africa will cost 80 cents. In Zambia, it will cost $1.5, and neighboring country, Congo, it will cost $7. Why? Because there's no road network. Things have to fly, to move from one place to another. So because of that, we have bottlenecks, impediments, economic barriers, and other barriers towards, achieving SDGs. We want to achieve them independently with the help of NGOs. But unfortunately, for us to achieve development, we need to create an African transport infrastructure to support our economies, and we need to develop it alone. Congo cannot, for example, Congo is divided into two places. The Congo that is Lubumbashi and the Congo Kinshasa, and there's no road. But the road is very difficult to build in those terrains. So what if it was an African project, for example, to connect Cape Town to Nigeria, to Morocco? So such infrastructure, if we plan together, we'll be able to meet SDGs. But not to say that we are actually not doing anything. We have managed to do a lot as Africa. In terms of education, we've been pushing. In terms of, coming to have, common standards of development, I think we have done quite enough, but
indeed,
we can do more.
Very well. And so let's move on to the point. In fact, you started this talking about the unemployment rate amongst mostly youthful population. And there are places where there are jobs, but no people to work. COVID has taught us that if we do nothing about the situation, we would have a lot of our own young people move over to where the jobs are. What are we staring as far as the future is concerned if the status quo remains? What would our workforce look like?
Well, if we continue like that, the way we are moving, we are going to face a situation whereby we are unable to provide, for our growing population. First of all, if there are no jobs, it means, and our economies are small, but compared to, to our population, we'll be unable to just feed our people. And Africa has seen these problems, coming. For example, the Arab Spring Revolution that was started by youth across Africa, you see. What were they fighting for? They wanted a fair share of the economy. They are seeing their oil, they are seeing their mineral resources being put on ships and moving out, but they can't access a computer, they can't, have a decent meal, they can't. So you start having, unrest across the globe. So it is now priority now to forcefully create new jobs, new value. And I hope that that thing cannot be, the problem with Africa is that we all have common problems, but we want to sort out our issues independently. This is an African problem.
That's really insightful to say. And would move on the conversation now to Nicholus, who's joined us back over the telephone. Nicholus, we were talking about our ability to carry ourselves along if the status quo remains. But while you make your point again, could you tell us what the possible implications on the environment could be if we do nothing about protecting it? What are the likely environmental impacts if we are laissez-faire about our environment, as it's been seen in the current?
As for our environment, I think that just looking at the pictures that are playing on the screen now, you can see that we have a huge population, but we have almost non-existent, solid waste management and just waste management process. What happens is that when your population is growing and you have what is known as the resource case, where you have a lot of mineral resources, you are not diversifying into other sectors of the economy. You're just mining raw materials and shipping them out. In the quest to collect more taxes, so as to, to be able to provide for a growing population, you mine more. And when you mine more with new technology, you are going to find that the mineral resources are depleted and you haven't diversified the economy. So there is an environmental aspect to that, where we are going to have a lot of holes in our grounds, especially, for example, in Zambia, where we have copper mining. There are a lot of mines. Some have even closed down. They flood. Some of them, like Zambia, has the most polluted city in the world, Kabwe, which is polluted by lead, and nobody's doing anything about it. Once in a while, people volunteer $10 million to try to clean the environment, but it's too late. That's one. Two, when you look at solid waste management, you find that if in Europe it's comprehensive, you can hardly find people, throwing garbage just like that. We don't treat it in Africa. Then there's also things like how to manage fecal sludge, how to manage our sewer system. Very few countries have organized sewer systems. You find, there's a lack of planning, and when the population grows, that becomes a hazard. You find that in most African countries, there is a little centralized water systems. People are digging boreholes anywhere. They are digging, pit latrines everywhere, and all that is combining. So whilst our population is at this level and it's okay, in the future that might cause a hazard.
Very well. Lubinda, as you have rightly said, a growing population does not necessarily spell doom. It is what you do about that growing population. We are at a point on the continent where we would have to ask ourselves tough questions and take tough decisions in order to turn this around. If you were to advise government leaders, what are those questions you'd want them to ask themselves going into the next century in order to turn this population growth into a blessing rather than a curse?
So we need, we cannot reinvent the wheel. We need to provide education to our youth. That is one. We need to force innovation. We need to groom our youth. The population actually is an advantage, and I'll use Nigeria as an example. You know, Nigeria, maybe the people that live in Nigeria don't think so, but for those of us that are watching from outside, Nigeria is now the largest economy in Africa, overtaking South Africa. Why? Because of the population. You know, Nigeria has a lot of billionaires, US dollar billionaires. Why? Because they're able to provide the population. Where there's competition, people compete to have more skills, to have more, you know, to have more, to perform better so that they're able to make it. And that in itself creates the Dangotes, you know, creates multinationals because, yes, you are coming against a background of a country which has a vast, you know, population. And, you know, when you look at Nigeria, if you're a company and in Africa you produce, I don't know what, Nigeria is a market of, you know, a huge population. I think transnational companies find Nigeria very attractive. And because of the availability of people who are able to consume, you find that people would rather not go to a country with a small population, but to invest in Nigeria. And that's why you are going to see that in the next 10 years, with the peace and stability that we are observing in Nigeria, Nigeria is going to be, you know, the next Brazil, the next, you know, India. I mean, in terms of an economic superpower in the world, with a GDP of over $400 billion, thankful to a very entrepreneurial, you know, population. And, you know, because of the huge population, a lot of people want, you know, they're competing for less number of schools. They start going outside the country and start creating an international footprint, moving resources from outside the country back home. You know, and that in itself also creates a value for, you know, for the countries where we come from. So to say that a huge population is doomed, no. Nigeria is the most populous nation in Africa, and it's the most, you know, attractive market for any company that wishes to operate there. I can mention a lot of Zambian companies operating in Nigeria at the moment because of the huge demand.
Lubinda, your optimism, time and insights are appreciated here on the program. Thank you so much. Lubinda,
I really appreciate.
Absolutely. Lubinda Haabazoka is Director of Graduate School of Business at the University of Zambia in Lusaka. Earlier, you heard me in the conversation with Nicholus Obby Mainza, who is the Mumbwa District Agricultural Coordinator, also in Zambia. Well, I hope that you can, going forward, take better decisions as well, better procreation decisions. You know, as far as your life is concerned, you have learned a thing or two about adding on to the world's population or the continent's population. I have done my share. And my name is Keminni Amanor. Thank you for your company here.